An 85-year-old man mistakenly collided with a motorcycle parked by the curb. The furious biker rushed at him, delivering a punch to his face, and ignoring both his apologies and the veteran's jacket he wore. Onlookers stayed silent, averting their gazes. However, within just half an hour, engines thundered from afar as an armed military unit descended upon the scene. Still believe that seniors are always defenseless. Tap honor if you think dignity should be upheld no matter what. Edward Ed Mitchell was a retired Marine, 85 years old, who had honorably served his country for 30 years. Although his body had become frail over time, his spirit remained as strong as when he first donned the uniform in 1955. On that particular morning, Ed made the trip to the local supermarket to pick up bread and milk, a routine task that became more challenging each year. Due to arthritis limiting his mobility, he wore his well-worn Marine Corps jacket, not seeking attention, but because it offered warmth and comfort on chilly mornings. The parking lot buzzed with activity that day as shoppers rushed by, absorbed in their phones and shopping lists. Amidst this bustle, no one paid attention to the elderly man, methodically making his way through the maze of cars and carts, his worn hands holding tightly onto grocery bags, struggling under the weight of his purchases. On the track towards the bus stop, Ed unintentionally brushed against a shiny black motorcycle parked near the sidewalk. The touch was slight, hardly enough to disturb its stance, but it still drew glances from a group of bikers gathered nearby. Ed halted abruptly and turned to check for any damage. Seeing that none was done, he bowed his head respectfully toward the group. "I'm very sorry, gentlemen," he said, his voice trembling slightly with age. "My hands aren't as steady as they once were." "No harm meant." One of the bikers, a tall man with heavily tattooed arms and clad in a leather vest, advanced towards Ed, his face twisted in unwarranted anger. "You just touched my baby, you worthless old man," the biker snarled as he loomed over Ed. Despite his imposing stance, Ed's stature was different, stood barely 5 feet tall now, with a spine curved by age. Blinking in confusion, Ed said softly, "I only bumped it accidentally." Suddenly and without warning, the biker's fist crashed into Ed's face, a brutal blow that sent the elderly veteran sprawling onto the concrete below. His groceries scattered chaotically across the pavement. Milk formed pools around shattered glass while bread lay crushed beneath his fallen body. Onlookers gasped but remained immobile in shock at what they witnessed unfold before them. A young supermarket employee briefly emerged to assess event unfolding outside store boundaries, but after momentary hesitation retreated back inside as though oblivious entirely toward incident, unraveling beyond threshold of entryway itself. Blood dripped from Ed's nose and split lip as he held onto his worn veteran's cap, which had slipped off during the fall. The gold Marine Corps emblem glinted faintly in the morning light, unnoticed by anyone around him. Meanwhile, a biker rejoined his group of friends, laughing harshly. "Stay away from government freeloaders," he shouted over his shoulder mockingly. Ed labored to sit up, and Ed reaching for his phone to call police or crying out for help, but simply trying to reclaim what was left of both his dignity and scattered groceries. His hands shook as he tried to wipe blood from his face with an old handkerchief bearing the Marine Corps emblem. An elderly woman passing by gave a sympathetic shake of her head, but didn't pause to assist him. A young mother gently tugged her curious child away, quieting their questions about the injured man, and eventually reached a nearby bench. Each breath labored and painful. His military training had equipped him to withstand physical pain, yet nothing could have prepared him for the profound hurt of feeling so utterly devalued and realizing that his country, he had risked his life for a country that no longer saw him as someone worth defending. As he sat there, shoulders slumped and bleeding, and Mitchell felt more alone than ever before, even more so than in the jungles of Vietnam or the deserts of the Middle East. In those places, he always had his brothers in arms by his side. Now, despite being surrounded by fellow citizens, in a peaceful American suburb, not one person stood with him. No one remembered that this frail old man with blood on his face once served as their shield against threats to their freedom. No one realized that the shaking hands, now struggling to hold groceries, had once bravely defended against tyranny in long-forgotten battles. Unbeknownst to everyone else, a young supermarket employee witnessed it all through the store window. His name was Ryan Garcia, college student, working part-time to support his education. Keeping a low profile, Ryan quietly took out his phone and sent a text message labeled only as Commander. "Sir, you must come immediately. Your father has been attacked." Just 15 minutes later, the ordinary sounds of the shopping center were interrupted by the distant roar of powerful engines. A military-grade SUV led 3 smaller Humvees into the parking lot with a precision that reflected years of tactical training. The vehicles parked in perfect formation, effectively blocking any potential escape routes. From the lead vehicle emerged Major Jason Mitchell's son and commander of a rapid response unit from a nearby military base dressed in combat fatigues. His face a mask of controlled rage. He surveyed the area and saw his father still seated on the bench, dried blood marking his weathered features. Jason walked directly toward him with an air that unmistakably suggested authority. The 12 soldiers accompanying him dispersed strategically across the parking lot without requiring any instructions. Kneeling before his father, Jason asked tightly through clenched emotion, "Who did this?" The supermarket employee who had messaged him advanced, indicating the group of bikers lounging casually by their motorcycles, appearing indifferent to the elderly man they had attacked. Jason rose deliberately, turned around, and gave a barely noticeable nod to his team. The soldiers quietly assumed their positions, without carrying any weapons, yet their mere presence instantly transformed the parking lot's atmosphere. Conversations abruptly halted mid-sentence. Shoppers frenzy, aware that something important was happening. Jason walked over to the biker who had collided with his father. The man rose aggressively, shifting from a relaxed stance to one of defense. "Who the hell are you two?" he demanded. Jason presented his military ID and replied calmly, "I'm here to make sure this veteran and every other veteran gets the respect they've earned." The color drained from the biker's face as he took in Jason's military uniform surrounding him. The soldiers, now in a disciplined formation, effectively controlled the parking lot. Jason's eyes reflected cold determination as he chose not to resort to violence like the biker did. Instead, he calmly contacted local police via radio. They arrived within minutes, with military personnel witnessing the incident this time. Officers had no option but to address the assault seriously. The biker was handcuffed and placed into a patrol car while onlookers gathered around them. Once the situation calmed down, and with arrest made official by arriving cops which witnessed whole altercation, the presence of army members, people watched attentively. When Jason returned towards where his father lay injured nearby, kneeling beside him before using one vehicle's first aid kit gently clean blood off face. "I'm sorry, Dad," he whispered just for his father's ears. "I should have come sooner." The spectators, many who had previously ignored the assault, started to take off their hats and bow their heads in a gesture of delayed respect. A senior veteran among them snapped to attention and gave Ed a respectful military salute. Gradually, This act rippled through the crowd as individuals of all ages straightened up slightly more uprightly. They weren't merely honoring one man but recognizing what he stood for. There are times when we realize that true honor is not in what we say, but in our treatment of those who have quietly given so much for us. If you believe gratitude deserves strong protection, tap honor now to show support for those who fought for our freedom. The incident quickly caught fire on social media and local news channels. It started with a few unsteady cell phone recordings and soon evolved into a national discussion about how society often overlooks the struggles faced by veterans. Residents from the town and even voiced their outrage over the violence inflicted on an elderly veteran. Ed's humble home was inundated with letters, flowers, and get-well cards from people he had never met but who were touched by his story. A nearby veterans organization organized a small ceremony to honor Ed not only for this recent event but also for his lifetime of service that had largely gone unnoticed. What began as a modest gathering turned into a large assembly as hundreds of community members expressed their desire to attend. At the event, the Master of Ceremonies shared Ed's impressive service record, 32 years in the United States Marine Corps, involvement in 3 major overseas campaigns, and honors including both a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart. Among his heroic acts was rescuing 9 fellow Marines during an ambush in Kandahar. He also rendered distinguished service in military intelligence for operations that still remain classified today. As each accomplishment was recounted, tales Ed had never personally boasted about, the audience's respect visibly grew deeper. For years, people had walked by him on the street without notice, unaware that they were passing a living piece of history. But when Ed's name was announced in the auditorium, everyone stood up simultaneously, offering an uproarious applause that lasted almost 5 minutes. Sitting in his wheelchair with hands trembling and tears running down his deeply lined face, this man who once faced enemy fire, unfazed, now found himself overwhelmed by such long-awaited recognition. His son, Major Jason, approached the stage and knelt before his father as a sign of deep respect. "Dad," he announced, his voice resonating through the microphone, "you fought for our freedom. Today, let me stand up for your honor." Later, during a media interview after the ceremony, a reporter inquired if Ed felt any resentment towards the person who had attacked him. With a sad smile on his face and shaking his head slightly, Ed replied softly that he only wished perhaps that individual had learned to be grateful. This simple declaration of forgiveness over revenge touched many in the audience profoundly and brought them to tears. Here stood a man who, even after enduring physical assault, maintained the moral compass that had directed him through decades of service. After the ceremony, the city mayor issued an executive order to rename a major street as Veteran Ed Mitchell Way, a lasting tribute to the silent sacrifices made by elder warriors still in our midst. Yet perhaps most surprisingly was what came from James "Tank" Weber himself. Biker involved was at a meeting with Ed before his sentencing hearing following his arrest, and amid widespread publicity regarding the case. Although initially hesitant, Ed ultimately agreed. In the modest conference room at the courthouse, Weber Saturday across from his victim, no stripped of his leather vest and bravado, his head hung low as he clasped his hands tightly together in front of him. "Sir," he started quietly, voice barely above a whisper, "my father was a Vietnam vet who returned broken and drank himself to death when I was 12. Growing up resenting everything about the military because it took him from me, Ed listened silently while the younger man continued on. When I saw your jacket, something inside just snapped. It wasn't about you. It was about him and all the suffering he endured. Weber glanced up, his eyes red with emotion. I can't undo my actions, he admitted, but I want you to know I'm beginning therapy now and volunteering at the VA hospital on my own accord, regardless of whether it's mandated by a judge. Ed reached across the table and gently placed his weathered hand on Weber's tattooed arm. Then something positive has come from this situation after all, he said reassuringly. The judge, influenced by this reconciliation, gave Weber a probation sentence, contingent on ongoing therapy and community service. Veterans an outcome Ed endorsed. Subsequently, Weber started volunteering regularly at the local VA hospital, assisting veterans with mobility challenges in reaching their appointments. Afterward, Ed shared with his son that the greatest victory isn't conquering your enemy, it's transforming them into a friend. Each morning sees Ed Mitchell heading to the nearby park, donning his worn veteran's cap and carrying a coffee cup while observing passersby. Though his routine remains mostly unchanged, people's reactions to him have evolved over time. Nowadays, strangers pause to shake his hand. Parents discreetly point him out to their children, whispering about sacrifice and service. Where he once blended into the background, Ed is now a quiet celebrity. Yet the attention hasn't changed him at all. One day, a young boy timidly approached him and asked, "Sir, were you really a hero?" With a gentle smile, Ed ruffled the boy's hair, before replying that true heroes don't need recognition, they just need to remember why they took action in the first place. The initially violent incident evolved into a profound community awakening. The local school district launched a program that brought veterans into classrooms, encouraging them to share their experiences with students. Additionally, the police department introduced specialized training for officers on how to interact effectively with elderly veterans who may be dealing with PTSD or other service-related conditions. Ed was invited to contribute his unique insights during these training sessions, offering perspectives only someone of his experience could provide. His silent dignity and capacity for forgiveness became integral to the training. Just like procedural aspects, that year's Veterans Day ceremony attracted a record crowd. A veteran at Mitchell Way's newly dedicated site. Among those present was James Weber, now serving as a volunteer coordinator for Veteran Transportation Services, who stood respectfully alongside uniformed men and women. True honor isn't merely an outward display. It's reflected in your subtle actions and how you treat others when no one is observing. Beneath the sheltering branches of an ancient oak, the aged Marine maintains his daily watch, a quiet, yet lasting emblem of bravery that surpasses both time and situation. If you hold that kindness, honor, and sacrifice are timeless virtues, subscribe to our YouTube channel, for some heroes never cease their service.